Every year in the springtime, I sow hundreds of succulent seeds. I'm an absolute fiend for it. They all go into an artificial propagator, and to try and maximize their growth, I usually keep them in there for close to 12 months. What that means though, is that every springtime I need to clear the propagator out, and I've got some relatively decent sized specimens that need new pots. You can see, for example, something like this. Now, it's why I'm always on the hunt for more space in the greenhouse. I thought I'd start a bit of a series where, while I repot some of these plants, just talk about them, talk about the processes involved, talk about the species. So today, I thought we'd focus on two Madagascan Euphorbia species, Euphorbia pachypodioides and Euphorbia guillauminiana. I'm going to hopefully find a bit more space for these guys, and excusing the blasting heat and fiery winds on a late winter's day, hopefully I don't cook in the process. So let's just have a bit of a chat about these plants. Here we go. So aside from just a leisurely chat while I slowly burn to a crisp here, I am of course repotting. And so I've got myself some of my mineral-based soil. You can find other videos where I talk about that more extensively. Got a pile of pots here, and of course got my plants. Now I might start with the pachypodioides. The name Euphorbia pachypodioides, I suppose, should give us a pretty decent hint the nature of the growth of this plant. It's named for its likeness to another genus, Pachypodium. Essentially, as you can see, it's got these big barbed spikes all over it and a rosette of leaves that emerges from the top, just like any of the other Madagascan Pachypodiums, to which this is not even slightly related. Now, these plants haven't just come straight out of the propagator. A very wise nurseryman once told me, change one thing at a time for your plants. So they come out of the propagator, they've spent a few weeks in the greenhouse just acclimatizing, what we might call hardening off. I wouldn't say that process is finished, but these are much closer to used to these conditions. Now that they've spent a few weeks out here, they're used to a bit more sun, used to the open air, they're not getting quite as much regular water, they're now ready to be separated. And so that's what we'll do now. Quite gently if we can, teasing out the roots. Some of these are going to come apart quite easily. I'm going to pop them down into the shade because I don't want them to get sunburnt. The big one in the middle here has really got most of the root mass in this. So it's going to be a bit hard separating the others, but we tease them out as best we can. 1, 2, let's get this one out as well. Don't have to be too delicate with their roots. Whoa, they recover pretty well. And then look at that. Now, I often get asked about, how you can get an 11-month seedling to about that size. Well, it's about replicating their habitat. Madagascar is a fairly tropical place, so in that propagator, they're getting quite strong light. It's not full sun, but I would describe it as very bright shade equivalent. They're also getting quite a lot of moisture, watered twice a week, and every second watering they get a very dilute fertilizer. If you do that, they can put on a lot of mass relatively quickly. Anyway, these are going to slow down quite significantly now they're out here, but that's totally okay. So we've got 4 of the Pachypodioides, and somewhat closely related species, Euphorbia guillauminiana. Different kind of growth habit. This one appears in, I suppose, a more open, bare, sunny location. The end result is, you can see, they're far more spiny. They have that kind of protective spination, and they're going to form over a very long period of time a very branched, almost shrub-like shape. Now, this is going to be a bit harder to tease out because, as you can see, there's a hell of a lot more of them in here. These are also about 11 months, maybe a little bit less, from germination. All right, so we get that out. Now we need to figure out how we're going to get these plants separated, because that is an absolute tangled mass of roots right there. Okay, so as delicately as I can, we'll just, I suppose, a bit of a sensual massage of the soil until we can start separating them. I'll repeat that process a few more times. Now, these are the sorts of plants that, unfortunately, for a long time have been the subject of poaching. But the very positive news is that seed producers, particularly in Southeast Asia, starting to make these plants and their seeds far more available to the world. So we don't have to, or collectors I suppose, don't have to feel compelled to buy something that's been pulled out of the wild if they want one of these plants. Never an excuse for it, but you know, anything that brings more plants into the hands of collectors in an ethical way, in my opinion, is a good thing. All right, these last ones are very, very well connected. Oh, I'm starting to rip a root there. I'm going to have to give that a trim. All right, bit of damage to the root of this one. I'll set it aside and give its roots a bit of a trim just to stop it from getting infected. But now they're coming apart quite easily. Beautiful. How's that? So the next process, and I'm not going to show you the whole process of me putting these plants in pots because that would be pretty boring, but I'll show you one for each species, and then we'll go from there, hey? So, guillauminiana just goes into the pot. You're going to want to try and keep your plant at roughly the same kind of root level as it was when it was packed in amongst all those other plants. These plants, now that they've got a bit of space and they're not stealing nutrients from each other, they'll be able to put on a little bit more size. I was kind of subsidising them with all the fertilisers that they were getting while they were in the propagator, but they're not going to get nearly as much now. We want them to really harden off and come to resemble, I suppose, specimen plants pretty quickly. Firm down the soil. That's one down. Now there's just about 10 or 11 to go. So what I'll do, I'll get the pachypodioides. Let's do the big one, hey? Again, positioning the root ball into the pot. Bit of that absolutely delicious soil. This soil has been enriched with a little bit of slow release fertilizer, as well as some kind of trace minerals, which hopefully will keep the plants very happy. And there we go. That's 2 plants done. I might as well show you what I'm going to do with that plant whose roots are damaged, and then we'll call it a day. I'll just do the others off camera. So if we have a look closely, you can see that as I was separating this guillauminiana from the others, one of the roots kind of got torn. It's exposed the inside of the stem. You can see there's a bit of that white sap that's customary of all euphorbias. Now, I find having cutting tools of different strengths relatively useful. I'm going to start trying to be delicate with my delicate little sewing scissors. If that doesn't work, we go nuclear with the secateurs. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to try and remove the offending root and chop just like that. Now, the sap of euphorbias is a really good kind of source of preventing pathogens from getting in here. It's essentially a latex that will form a film over that plant and stop anything from getting in there that's too nasty. But even so, I'm going to let this dry maybe for 1 or 2 days, let that latex solidify, create a protective barrier, and then I'll just pot this up like everything else, and it's almost certainly going to be completely fine. So, the first instance of me sharing with you some of the many hundreds of seedlings that have got to come out from under my house, out of the propagator into the greenhouse. That's why I had to tidy the place the other day. So anyway, hopefully you found something interesting there. Maybe you learned something, maybe you didn't. Anyway, happy growing. I'll catch you next time, where maybe I'll have a look at some stapeliads or something weird like that. Catch you around.